When we think of the ancient Vedas, what usually comes to mind? Spirituality, right? Philosophy, ancient rituals. But what if I told you there's something else hiding in plain sight? An unseen blueprint, a roadmap of incredible scientific and technical knowledge just waiting to be decoded.
And look, the thousands of years, that's exactly what these texts have been known for. They're seen as these really profound sources of spiritual wisdom. And for good reason. They've shaped entire cultures and, inspired people all over the world. It's a perspective we all know.
But what if that's just scratching the surface? What if there's another layer to this story? A layer packed with sophisticated science, encoded right into the verses. Well, that's the question we're going to dive into today.
So, where do we start? Let's look up to the stars.
Because it turns out some of the earliest texts connected to the Vedas weren't just about gods and prayers, they were about keeping time on a truly cosmic scale.
Meet the Vedanga Jyotisha. Now this is absolutely crucial to understand. This wasn't some simple star chart for sailors. No, this was an algorithm, a whole set of rules for computation, designed to create a calendar that perfectly synced up the sun and the moon, all to make sure rituals were timed with incredible precision.
And through all these calculations, they landed on a really interesting number. The Vedanga Jyotisha defined a solar year as having 366 days. Now, we know today that's a slight overestimation, sure, but it was a critical piece in a much bigger, and honestly, a much cleverer system.
So how did they use that number? Well, they built a system around it. See, the lunar months don't quite line up with the solar year. So to keep everything in sync, they came up with this 5-year cycle they called a yuga. And the solution was so elegant. As you can see, they just added an extra month in the 3rd and 5th years. Problem solved. This kept all the seasons and festivals right where they should be.
The point here is, this was not just some rough guesswork. The math behind it was spot on. Over those 5 years, they calculated exactly 1,830 days, and that number lined up perfectly with 62 cycles of the moon. This wasn't just for calendars either. This deep understanding of cycles allowed them to see even bigger patterns, like the 18-year Saros cycle of eclipses. Pretty incredible stuff.
Okay, so from the laws of the cosmos, we're now going to pivot to the laws of language. And this is where we find something that looks, well, it looks shockingly modern. A system so logical, so precise, that some people have actually called it the world's very first piece of software.
We're talking about the Ashtadhyayi, the masterpiece of a grammarian named Panini. This is just a staggering intellectual achievement. I mean, just try to imagine it. Creating a kind of language machine with less than 4,000 rules that could spit out pretty much any correct Sanskrit sentence you could ever think of.
And this is where your jaw might just hit the floor. When you put Panini's system right next to modern computer science, the parallels are they're uncanny. A finite set of rules creating infinite outputs, that's literally the core of programming. Context-sensitive rules, recursion, algebraic structures, it's all there. 2,500 years before the first computer was even a dream.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This isn't some new idea. Way back in 1985, an AI researcher named Rick Briggs wrote in AI Magazine that a lot of what we're doing in computer science today is really just a rediscovery of what these ancient masters already figured out. It totally reframes how you think about the history of technology, doesn't it?
But okay, this scientific way of thinking wasn't all just theory locked away in texts. It was applied knowledge. It was built to last. And we can still see the proof today, literally etched in stone and woven into everyday health practices.
Take a look at this number, 2,000 tons. That's the estimated weight of a single stone block, the one that sits on top of the Konark Sun Temple from the 13th century. Seriously, how did they even move, let alone lift and place something that massive?
And their skill with materials was just as amazing. The builders of Konark picked this local stone, Kundalite. Now just check out this comparison. After 750 years in a brutal coastal environment, it's eroded only 2.4 millimeters. St. Paul's Cathedral in London, which is less than half as old, has eroded up to 69 millimeters. That is not luck. That is next-level foresight in materials science.
And this scientific approach wasn't just for temples and stone. It was also applied to the human body through Ayurveda, a traditional system of medicine that's all about holistic health and wellness.
This chart here really breaks it down. It shows something Ayurvedic principles seem to understand intuitively for centuries. Our modern food processing, it's all about convenience, but it often strips out the good stuff. But traditional methods, like cooking with fresh vegetables, using grains that are manually processed, even cooking in simple iron pots, these were naturally way better at keeping those essential vitamins and minerals intact.
It's a science of nutrition built from ages of observation. So as we start to pull all these different threads together, from astronomy to language to architecture, a new, much richer picture of these ancient texts really starts to take shape.
What this all shows us is that if you only look at these traditions through one lens, whether it's just religion or just mythology or just history, you're getting an incomplete story. The blueprint has layers. In this worldview, what we call spirituality and what we call science, they weren't two different things. They were totally integrated, part of one single holistic way of seeing the world.
And that really leads us to the final thought for today. These texts show us this amazing integration of the material world and the metaphysical, the scientific and the inspirational. And it leaves us with a pretty big question. In our world today, which is so specialized, what new discoveries, what new insights could we possibly unlock if we started exploring that powerful connection once more? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.